In a peaceful suburban neighborhood where tree-lined streets and manicured lawns gave the impression of harmony, Sarah Thompson lived a quiet life. Her home was her sanctuary, a cozy two-story house with a small garden and a driveway that rarely saw much activity. Sarah didn't have a car of her own, so her driveway often sat empty, blending seamlessly into the calm rhythm of the neighborhood. But all of that changed one sunny morning when she noticed something unusual. Sarah had just stepped onto her porch, coffee mug in hand, ready to soak up the crisp autumn air. As she settled into her favorite chair, her eyes drifted toward her driveway. That's when she saw it, a black SUV parked neatly in her space. At first she thought nothing of it. Perhaps it belonged to a visitor who had stopped by while she was out running errands earlier. Maybe someone from the neighborhood got confused about addresses and left their vehicle there temporarily. She shrugged it off, figuring the owner would return soon enough. But as days passed, the SUV remained exactly where it was. No one came to move it, and no note or explanation appeared on her windshield. The sight began gnawing at her curiosity. Who could this belong to? Why hadn't they moved it yet? Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. It wasn't until the second day rolled around that she decided to investigate further. Her first instinct was to ask her next-door neighbor, Mark. He was friendly enough, always waving hello whenever they crossed paths, though they weren't particularly close. Still, he seemed like the logical person to approach since his house was right beside hers. So after finishing her morning routine, Sarah walked over to Mark's front door and knocked lightly. Mark answered almost immediately, his usual cheerful demeanor intact. "Hey, Sarah, what's up?" he asked, leaning casually against the doorway. Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking. She didn't want to sound accusatory but needed answers. "Hi, Mark," she began, trying to keep her tone light. "I was wondering if you know anything about the black SUV parked in my driveway. It's been there for a couple of days now, and I'm not sure whose it is." Mark's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of guilt crossing his face. For a brief moment, he looked like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Then, clearing his throat, he replied, "Oh, yeah, actually, that's mine." Sarah blinked in surprise. "Yours?" she repeated, unsure how to process this revelation. "Why is it parked in my driveway?" Mark rubbed the back of his neck nervously, clearly aware that he was treading delicate ground. "Well, you see, there's been some road work going on near my place," he explained. "The workers blocked off most of the street, and parking has become really tight. I figured your driveway was empty anyway, so I thought it wouldn't hurt to use it for a little while, just until things clear up." Sarah listened intently, her mind racing. On one hand, she understood the frustration of limited parking options. Living in a suburban area meant dealing with occasional inconveniences like road repairs. But on the other hand, Mark hadn't asked for permission. He'd simply assumed it was okay to use her property without consulting her first. And that bothered her deeply. She forced herself to remain calm, not wanting to escalate the situation prematurely. "I get that parking can be tricky sometimes," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "But using my driveway without asking feels, well, disrespectful. You should have talked to me about it beforehand." Mark nodded quickly, sensing her growing irritation. "You're absolutely right," he admitted. "I shouldn't have done that. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. Sorry for the trouble." Relieved that he seemed genuinely apologetic, Sarah let the matter drop for now. She told him she appreciated his honesty and reminded him that communication was key moving forward. With that, she headed back to her house, hoping the issue was resolved. However, deep down, Sarah couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that lingered. Something about the whole situation felt off. While Mark had apologized, she couldn't help but wonder if he truly grasped the gravity of what he'd done. Using someone else's property without consent wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a violation of personal boundaries. And Sarah knew that letting such behavior slide could set a dangerous precedent. As the days went by, Sarah kept a closer eye on her driveway, half expecting to see another unfamiliar vehicle appear. Thankfully, it stayed empty and life returned to its usual pace. For a week, everything seemed fine. She convinced herself that maybe Mark had learned his lesson and respected her wishes. Yet despite her efforts to move past the incident, Sarah couldn't ignore the nagging voice in the back of her mind. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. And though she wanted to believe the best in her neighbor, part of her wondered, was this really the end of it? Or was there more to come? Little did she know, her suspicions were about to be confirmed in a way she never anticipated. After her initial conversation with Mark, Sarah tried to put the whole incident behind her. She reminded herself that everyone makes mistakes and that Mark had apologized sincerely. For a while, life returned to its usual rhythm. Her driveway remained empty, and she didn't see any signs of Mark or his SUV encroaching on her property again. But deep down, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. It wasn't just about the SUV, it was about the principle of the matter. Her property was hers alone, and no one should feel entitled to use it without permission. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Sarah came home from work. She pulled into her driveway, relieved to finally be back after a long day. But as she stepped out of her car, something caught her eye. A silver sedan parked neatly in the corner of her driveway. Her heart sank. This wasn't Mark's SUV, but it was unmistakably another vehicle that didn't belong there. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, staring at the unfamiliar car. Her mind raced with questions. Who did it belong to? Why was it here? Had Mark started lending her driveway to other people without telling her? The thought made her blood boil. She had already set boundaries with him, and yet here was another car, blatantly parked in her space as if it were public property. Determined to get answers, Sarah marched over to Mark's house. She knocked firmly on his door, her frustration bubbling beneath the surface. When he opened it, his expression shifted from casual curiosity to nervous apprehension when he saw the look on her face. "Mark," Sarah began, trying to keep her voice steady. "There's a silver car in my driveway right now. Do you know anything about it?" Mark hesitated, clearly caught off guard. He glanced past her toward her driveway, then back at her. "Oh, yeah," he stammered. "That's my brother's car. He's visiting for the weekend, and I told him he could park there since your driveway was empty." Sarah felt her patience wearing thin. "You told him?" she repeated, incredulous. "Mark, we talked about this. You can't just decide to let other people use my property like it's some kind of shared space. It's not okay." Mark raised his hands defensively, as if trying to ward off her growing irritation. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't think it would be a big deal. Your driveway's usually empty anyway, so I figured it wouldn't hurt." "That's not the point," Sarah snapped, her voice rising slightly. "The point is that you're making decisions about my property without even asking me. That's disrespectful, Mark. Whether my driveway is empty or not doesn't change the fact that it's mine, and I don't want anyone using it unless I say so." Mark looked genuinely taken aback by her reaction. Okay, he said quickly. "I get it. I messed up. I'll tell him to move it tomorrow morning, I promise." Sarah took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She knew yelling wouldn't solve anything, but it was hard not to feel disrespected. "Thank you," she said firmly. "And please, no more surprises. If anyone else needs parking, they'll have to figure it out themselves." With that, she turned and walked back to her house, leaving Mark standing awkwardly on his porch. Though their conversation ended on a somewhat conciliatory note, Sarah couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach. This wasn't just about one car or two. It was about a pattern of behavior that seemed unlikely to stop unless she took stronger action. Over the next few days, Sarah kept a close watch on her driveway. To her relief, the silver sedan disappeared, and no new vehicles appeared in its place. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to hope that Mark had finally understood the message. Maybe things would go back to normal, and she could forget about the whole ordeal. But Sarah wasn't naive. She knew better than to assume the problem was solved for good. People often underestimated the importance of boundaries until they were forced to confront them directly. And Sarah wasn't willing to let this slide a third time, not without taking steps to protect her property. Her first idea was simple, a handwritten note. Late one night, after deciding she'd had enough of playing defense, Sarah grabbed a piece of paper and a marker. In bold letters, she wrote, "Please do not park here, this is private property." She taped the note to the windshield of the silver sedan before it vanished, hoping the message would serve as a deterrent for anyone else who might consider using her driveway. For a short while, it seemed to work. Days passed without incident, and Sarah began to relax. She even caught herself thinking that maybe Mark had learned his lesson and spread the word to others. But deep down, she knew better than to trust appearances. Experience had taught her that problems like this rarely disappeared on their own. They only went dormant until the next opportunity arose, and sure enough, her suspicions were confirmed one chilly evening. Sarah had just finished dinner and was cleaning up the kitchen when she heard the unmistakable sound of tires crunching against gravel outside. Her heart skipped a beat. She peeked through the curtains, half expecting to see another unfamiliar car. What she saw instead made her jaw drop. Mark's SUV was pulling into her driveway once again. Fury surged through her veins. How could he do this? After all the conversations, the apologies, the promises, it felt like nothing had changed. Sarah clenched her fists, trying to suppress the urge to storm outside immediately. She needed to stay calm, to handle this rationally. But the longer she watched him park casually as if nothing were wrong, the harder it became to contain her anger. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, Sarah marched out of her house and straight toward Mark's SUV. By the time she reached the driveway, he was stepping out of the vehicle, completely unaware of the storm brewing behind him. "Mark," she called sharply, her voice cutting through the quiet night air. He turned around, startled, and his eyes widened when he saw the fury etched across her face. "Sarah," he began, but she cut him off before he could finish. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her tone icy. "We've been over this multiple times. You can't keep using my driveway whenever it suits you." "It's not yours to use." Mark looked flustered, scrambling to explain himself. I know, I'm sorry," he stammered. "But I swear it's just temporary. My street is still under construction, and I didn't think—" "You didn't think?" Sarah interrupted, her voice rising. "That's the problem, Mark. You never think. You act like my driveway is some kind of free-for-all because it's convenient for you. But guess what? It's not convenient for me. Every time you park here without asking, you're crossing a line, and I'm tired of it." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but Sarah wasn't done. She poured out everything she'd been holding back, the frustration, the disrespect, the violation of her personal space. Each word carried the weight of weeks of pent-up emotions, and Mark could do little more than stand there, looking increasingly uncomfortable. By the time Sarah finished, both of them were breathing heavily, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, finally, Mark broke the silence. "I'm really sorry, Sarah," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how much this was affecting you. I'll move my car right now, and I promise it won't happen again." Sarah crossed her arms, skeptical but too exhausted to argue further. "Good," she said simply. "Because if it does, I'll have to take things to the next level. And trust me, you won't like it." With that, she turned and walked back inside, leaving Mark to deal with the consequences of his actions. As she closed the door behind her, she leaned against it, letting out a heavy sigh. She had drawn a clear line in the sand, and now it was up to Mark to decide whether he would respect it or push his luck one too many times. The confrontation with Mark left Sarah feeling drained but resolute. She had made her position crystal clear, and though she hoped it would be enough to stop him from using her driveway again, deep down, she wasn't convinced. Experience had taught her that some people only learn when forced to face consequences, and Mark seemed like someone who needed more than words to change his behavior. For a few days after their heated exchange, everything appeared calm. Mark kept his distance, avoiding eye contact whenever they passed each other on the street or in the neighborhood. His SUV stayed firmly parked near his house, even if it meant squeezing into tight spaces along the curb. Sarah allowed herself a small sense of relief, thinking perhaps he'd finally understood the seriousness of the situation. But as time went on, she couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that this peace was temporary, a lull before another storm. Her instincts proved correct one chilly Saturday morning. Sarah woke up early, intending to spend the day tidying up her garden. As she stepped outside, coffee mug in hand, she froze at the sight of yet another unfamiliar car parked in her driveway. This time, it was a red compact sedan, its paint gleaming under the pale morning sunlight. Her stomach churned with frustration. Clearly, Mark hadn't gotten the message, or worse, he was encouraging others to treat her property as an open resource. Sarah approached the car cautiously, inspecting it for any clues about its owner. There were no notes, no signs of urgency, just another blatant disregard for her boundaries. Her mind raced with possibilities. Was this another family member of Mark's? A friend visiting him? Or had word spread among neighbors that her driveway was available for anyone to use? Determined not to let this go unanswered, Sarah decided to take immediate action. She grabbed a piece of paper and a marker, scribbling a stern note. "This is private property. Do not park here. Please remove your vehicle immediately." She taped the note prominently on the windshield, hoping it would send a strong enough message to whoever owned the car. Throughout the day, Sarah kept glancing out her window, waiting for the car to disappear. Hours ticked by, but the sedan remained stubbornly parked in her driveway. By evening, her patience had worn thin. Whoever owned the car clearly wasn't taking her warning seriously, or perhaps they simply didn't care. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah lay awake replaying the events of the past weeks in her mind. She realized that relying on handwritten notes and verbal warnings wasn't going to cut it anymore. If she wanted to protect her property, she needed to take stronger measures. The thought weighed heavily on her, but she knew it was necessary. No one should have to repeatedly defend their space against trespassers, especially when those trespassers acted so casually about their actions. The next morning, Sarah sat down at her kitchen table with her laptop. She began researching ways to safeguard her driveway and enforce her rights as a homeowner. After hours of reading articles and consulting local ordinances, she came across two potential solutions: installing a no trespassing sign and setting up security cameras. Installing a sign felt like the simplest first step. It would serve as a visible reminder to anyone tempted to use her driveway that her property was off limits. Sarah ordered a sturdy metal sign online, ensuring it was bold and impossible to miss. When it arrived a few days later, she mounted it at the entrance of her driveway, making sure it faced both the street and her neighbor's house. The message was clear: private property, no trespassing allowed. But Sarah knew a sign alone wouldn't deter everyone. Some people might ignore it altogether, assuming she wouldn't follow through on enforcing her rules. That's where the second solution came in: security cameras. They weren't just a deterrent, they were proof. With video footage, she could hold violators accountable and provide evidence if she ever needed to involve authorities. After careful consideration, Sarah purchased a wireless camera system with motion detection and night vision capabilities. She installed the cameras discreetly around her property, positioning them to cover her driveway and surrounding areas. Knowing her every move was being recorded gave her a renewed sense of control. If anyone dared to park in her driveway again, she'd have undeniable proof of their actions. Despite these precautions, Sarah couldn't help but feel uneasy. She wondered how far she'd have to go to make people respect her boundaries. Would a sign and cameras be enough, or would she need to escalate further? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she refused to back down. Protecting her property wasn't just about convenience. It was about principle. Everyone deserved to feel secure in their own home, and Sarah was determined to reclaim that sense of security. A week passed without incident. Sarah started to hope that her new measures had sent a strong enough message. Then, late one evening, she heard the familiar crunch of tires on gravel. Her heart sank as she peeked through the curtains and saw headlights illuminating her driveway, To her disbelief, Mark's SUV was pulling in once again. Fury surged through her veins, but this time she was prepared. Instead of rushing outside in anger, she calmly grabbed her phone and opened the app connected to her security cameras. She recorded the entire scene: the SUV parking, Mark stepping out, and even his brief hesitation as he glanced at the "No" trespassing sign. Every moment was captured in high definition, leaving no room for denial. Once Mark was inside his house, Sarah composed herself and walked over to knock on his door. When he answered, his expression shifted from surprise to guilt almost instantly. "Mark," she said evenly, holding up her phone. "I want you to see something." She showed him the live feed from her security cameras, zooming in on his SUV parked squarely in her driveway. "You've ignored my requests, broken promises, and now you're blatantly violating my property, despite all the warnings. I'm done playing nice. If you don't move your car immediately, I'll report you to the Homeowners Association and file a formal complaint with the police." Mark's face turned pale. He stammered, "Sarah, please, I didn't mean to upset you. I didn't think it was such a big deal." "It is a big deal," Sarah shot back, her voice firm but controlled. "Every time you park here without permission, you're trespassing, and I won't tolerate it anymore. You've left me no choice but to involve authorities if this continues." Realizing the gravity of the situation, Mark quickly apologized and promised to move his car right away. True to his word, he retrieved his keys and drove off within minutes. But Sarah knew better than to trust his apology completely. Words were cheap unless backed by consistent action. That night, Sarah drafted an email to the Homeowners Association, HOA, detailing the ongoing issue with Mark and providing screenshots from her security footage as evidence. She also reached out to the non-emergency line of the local police department, explaining the situation and asking for guidance on handling unauthorized parking on private property. Both organizations responded promptly, assuring her that steps would be taken to address the matter. While Sarah felt a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction, she couldn't deny the toll this ordeal had taken on her. Standing up for herself had been empowering, but it had also been emotionally draining. Still, she reminded herself that protecting her rights was worth the effort. Sometimes teaching others to value your space means showing them where the line is drawn and being willing to defend it. As she climbed into bed that night, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. For the first time in weeks, she felt confident that her message had been received loud and clear. Whether Mark chose to respect her boundaries moving forward remained to be seen. But one thing was certain: Sarah was ready to fight for what was hers, no matter what it took. The days following Sarah's decision to escalate the situation felt like a turning point. She had laid down her boundaries firmly, armed herself with evidence, and sought the support of authorities in the Homeowners Association, HOA. Now, it was time to see if these measures would finally put an end to Mark's repeated disregard for her property rights. After sending detailed emails to both the HOA and the local police department, Sarah waited anxiously for their responses. Within 48 hours, she received replies from both parties. The HOA expressed concern over the issue and assured her they would investigate further. They informed her that unauthorized use of private property violated community guidelines and promised to issue a formal warning to Mark. Meanwhile, the police provided clear instructions on how to proceed if any additional incidents occurred. They explained that repeated trespassing, even in the form of parking, could result in fines or even towing at the owner's expense. Armed with this information, Sarah felt a renewed sense of empowerment. For so long, she had allowed frustration and helplessness to weigh her down, but now she knew exactly what steps to take to protect her space. Still, part of her wondered whether Mark would actually change his behavior, or if he'd continue testing her resolve. Mark receives the warning. A few days later, Sarah noticed a marked shift in Mark's demeanor. He seemed unusually quiet, avoiding eye contact whenever they crossed paths. At first, she assumed he was simply embarrassed about their previous confrontation, but then she spotted him talking to a representative from the HOA near his front yard. It became clear that the message had been delivered, and it wasn't just coming from Sarah anymore. Later that afternoon, Mark approached Sarah hesitantly. His usual casual confidence was replaced by visible discomfort. "Hey, Sarah," he began awkwardly, scratching the back of his head. "I heard back from the HOA, and, I guess I really messed up." Sarah crossed her arms, studying his expression carefully. "Go on," she said evenly, waiting to hear what he had to say. "They told me I can't park in your driveway under any circumstances," Mark admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "And they said if it happens again, there could be penalties. Not just for me, but maybe for you too, since it involves your property." Sarah nodded slowly, appreciating his honesty, but remaining cautious. "That's right," she replied. "This isn't just about convenience for you. It's about respecting my rights as a homeowner. Every time someone uses my driveway without permission, it's trespassing, and I won't tolerate it." Mark sighed heavily, looking genuinely remorseful. "You're absolutely right. I've been selfish, and I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much stress I was causing you. From now on, I'll make sure no one parks there. Not me, not my family, not anyone." Though his apology sounded sincere, Sarah didn't let her guard down completely. She had heard similar promises before, only to have them broken repeatedly. Instead, she offered a measured response. "Thank you for apologizing, Mark, but actions speak louder than words. Let's see if things improve moving forward." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Mark standing alone. Though their interaction ended civilly, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this chapter of her life wasn't entirely closed yet. Only time would tell whether Mark truly intended to honor his word, or if another test of her patience lay ahead. The community reacts. As news of the dispute spread through the neighborhood, Sarah found herself at the center of whispered conversations. Some neighbors sympathized with her predicament, nodding knowingly when they saw her out walking her dog. Others, however, seemed skeptical of her decision to involve the HOA and police. One afternoon, while chatting with a neighbor named Linda, Sarah got a glimpse into the mixed reactions brewing around her. "I heard about the whole parking thing," Linda said cautiously, glancing toward Mark's house. "It must have been frustrating for you. But do you think involving the HOA was necessary? Couldn't you two have worked it out privately?" Sarah paused, considering her words carefully. "Believe me, I tried," she explained. "I gave Mark multiple chances to respect my boundaries, but nothing changed. He kept using my driveway despite my requests, and eventually, I realized that being polite wasn't enough. Sometimes people need consequences to understand where the line is." Linda nodded thoughtfully, though Sarah could tell she still harbored doubts. Word travels fast in small neighborhoods, and Sarah knew some residents might view her actions as overly harsh. But she refused to feel guilty for standing up for herself. Protecting her property wasn't about being difficult. It was about setting a precedent that everyone needed to respect personal boundaries. Another incident arises. Just when Sarah thought the worst was behind her, another incident tested her resolve. Late one evening, as she returned home from running errands, she noticed a white van parked in her driveway. Her stomach tightened with irritation. Not again. She pulled her car to the curb and stepped out, inspecting the vehicle closely. There were no familiar markings or identifying features, just a plain white van sitting boldly where it didn't belong. Determined to get answers, Sarah knocked on Mark's door once more. When he answered, his eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, hey, Sarah," he started nervously. "What's up?" "There's a van in my driveway," Sarah said bluntly, cutting straight to the chase. "Do you know anything about it?" Mark shook, his head quickly, looking genuinely confused. "No, I swear, I haven't parked there since our last conversation. Honestly, I don't know whose van that is." Sarah studied his reaction, searching for any sign of deception. To her relief, he seemed truthful, but that didn't solve the problem. If the van didn't belong to Mark, who did it belong to? And why was it parked in her driveway? She decided to leave a note on the windshield just as she had done before. "This is private property. Unauthorized parking will result in towing. Please remove your vehicle immediately." Then she retreated to her house, keeping a close eye on the van through her security cameras. Hours passed and the van remained untouched. By morning, Sarah's frustration reached its peak. Whoever owned the vehicle clearly wasn't planning to move it anytime soon. With no other options left, she contacted the non-emergency police line and reported the unauthorized parking. An officer arrived within the hour, inspecting the scene and documenting the violation. After confirming that the van had indeed been parked illegally, they arranged for it to be towed. Watching the tow truck haul the van away brought Sarah a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. On one hand, she felt vindicated knowing she had defended her property. On the other hand, the entire ordeal highlighted how far she'd had to go to ensure her rights were respected. It shouldn't have come to this, she thought bitterly. Yet, here she was, fighting battles that should never have existed in the first place. Reflection and resolve. As the weeks went by, Sarah's driveway finally stayed empty, a sight that filled her with both relief and pride. She had taken every possible step to protect her space, from installing signs and cameras to involving authorities and the HOA. While the process had been exhausting, it had also taught her valuable lessons about assertiveness and self-respect. Looking back, Sarah realized that the conflict with Mark wasn't just about parking. It was about teaching others to value her boundaries. By standing firm and refusing to compromise, she had sent a powerful message. Her property was hers alone, and no one had the right to use it without permission. Though her relationship with Mark remained strained, Sarah knew she had done the right thing. In the end, protecting her peace of mind was worth any temporary discomfort or tension. As she stood on her porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, she allowed herself a moment of quiet triumph. The battle may have been challenging, but she had emerged victorious and stronger than ever. The weeks that followed the towing of the white van marked a turning point in Sarah's life and in the neighborhood dynamics. Her driveway, once a source of frustration and conflict, finally remained empty. The absence of unfamiliar vehicles gave her a renewed sense of peace, but it also left her reflecting on everything she had endured. What started as a seemingly minor inconvenience had spiraled into a test of patience, communication, and resolve. Now, with the dust settling, Sarah found herself contemplating not just what she had achieved, but how she had grown through the process. Mark's transformation. Though Mark initially seemed embarrassed by the entire ordeal, his behavior began to shift in noticeable ways. After the incident with the towed van, he made a deliberate effort to avoid any further disputes with Sarah. He no longer parked near her property, not even close to the edge of her driveway, and kept his distance during their rare encounters. At first, Sarah suspected this change was driven more by fear of consequences than genuine understanding. But over time, subtle signs suggested otherwise. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah noticed a small envelope tucked under her doormat. Curious, she picked it up and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note from Mark. "Dear Sarah, I owe you a proper apology. I've spent a lot of time thinking about everything that happened, and I realize now how disrespectful I was. You were right. It wasn't just about parking, it was about respecting your space and your wishes. I'm truly sorry for all the trouble I caused. Moving forward, I'll make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Thank you for standing your ground and teaching me an important lesson. Sincerely, Mark." Sarah read the note twice, her emotions shifting between surprise and satisfaction. While words alone couldn't undo the past, they signaled a meaningful step toward reconciliation. She decided to acknowledge his gesture without reopening old wounds. Later that day, she sent him a brief text. "Thank you for your apology, Mark. I appreciate your honesty and hope we can move past this peacefully." Their relationship remained distant, but the tension dissipated. For Sarah, that was enough. She didn't need to be best friends with Mark. She simply needed mutual respect, which now seemed within reach. A lesson learned for everyone. Word of Sarah's unwavering stance spread quietly through the neighborhood, becoming a topic of conversation among residents. Some admired her determination to defend her boundaries, while others still questioned whether involving authorities had been necessary. Regardless of differing opinions, one thing became clear. Sarah's actions set a precedent. No one dared to park in her driveway again, or anyone else's property without explicit permission. Even Linda, who had initially expressed skepticism about Sarah's approach, admitted during a casual chat that the situation had prompted her to think differently. "You know," Linda said thoughtfully, "it's easy to take things for granted when they seem harmless. But after seeing what happened with you and Mark, I realized how important it is to respect other people's spaces. Even something as simple as asking first makes a big difference." Sarah smiled, feeling a quiet pride in knowing her experience had sparked broader awareness. Protecting her property hadn't just been about her. It had highlighted the importance of mutual respect in the community. Sometimes standing firm sends ripples far beyond the immediate issue at hand. Finding closure. Despite the progress, Sarah couldn't deny that the ordeal had taken its toll. The repeated confrontations, sleepless nights, and emotional strain weighed heavily on her. Yet amidst the challenges, she discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed. Assertiveness, once foreign to her nature, had become second nature. She learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was essential for preserving her well-being. To mark a fresh start, Sarah decided to focus on reclaiming her sanctuary. She spent weekends sprucing up her garden, planting vibrant flowers, and trimming overgrown bushes. The transformation mirrored her own journey, emerging stronger and more resilient after weathering a storm. As she worked in the sunlight, neighbors occasionally stopped by to compliment her efforts or exchange pleasantries. These small interactions reminded her that harmony could coexist with firmness. The bigger picture. Looking back, Sarah realized the situation had taught her lessons that extended far beyond her driveway. It reinforced the value of clear communication and the courage to stand up for oneself. She understood now that kindness doesn't mean letting others walk all over you. It means treating others with respect while demanding the same in return. She also reflected on the role of technology in resolving conflicts. Installing security. Cameras hadn't been something she'd considered before, but it proved invaluable in documenting violations and holding violators accountable. In today's world, where misunderstandings often escalate quickly, having evidence can make all the difference. Sarah encouraged several neighbors to invest in similar systems, emphasizing how they could provide peace of mind and deter potential trespassers. Moving forward. As winter approached, Sarah settled into a routine of calm and contentment. Her driveway stayed empty, her garden thrived, and her mornings on the porch returned to their peaceful rhythm. Though scars from the conflict lingered, both in her relationship with Mark and in her trust of others, she chose to focus on the positives. She had reclaimed her space, asserted her rights, and inspired those around her to reflect on their actions. One evening, as she sat wrapped in a blanket watching the sunset, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet gratitude. Life rarely goes exactly as planned, but sometimes challenges bring unexpected growth. She had faced adversity head-on and emerged stronger because of it, and though she hoped never to encounter another situation like this, she knew she was prepared if it did happen. In the end, the story of her driveway became more than just a tale of boundary setting. It was a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of standing firm, and the enduring value of respect for oneself and for others. Sarah's journey may have begun with frustration, but it concluded with wisdom, strength, and a renewed appreciation for the sanctuary she called home.